You familiar with the Arab News? Arab News is an English language daily newspaper published in Saudi Arabia. The editor-in-chief is a man named Faisal Abbas. He had been editor-in-chief of another English Arab publication. For that, worked for the Huffington Post. Wrote for the Huffington Post. So, I tell you this to say he's not exactly what you'd call a neocon. Here's what he wrote in the Arab News. Headline, Qasem Soleimani, he will kill no more. In the end, he died as he lived amid violence and bloodshed, this time brought about by a hand other than his own. Let no one be in any doubt that the death of Qasem Soleimani, targeted by a U.S. airstrike on Baghdad airport in the early hours of Friday, is as significant in its own way as those of Osama bin Laden, the head of al-Qaeda, and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS. Like those two killers, Soleimani brought death and destruction to a vast swath of the Middle East and beyond. And like them, the more publicly his vile deeds attracted, the better he liked it. It was not always thus with Soleimani. For at least 15 years in his role as the head of the Quds Force, the Foreign Operations Unit of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, he did Iran's dirty work in the shadows, spreading the malign influence of the mullahs and their revolution to anyone foolish enough to listen. Then, about 5 years ago, he seemed to start believing his own publicity, and the real Soleimani emerged. Arrogant, preening, boastful of his personal power. Since then, wherever there has been death and mayhem in the region, you will find a glossy photo or a slick video of Soleimani, his arm round the shoulder of some hapless militiaman recruited to the cause of Iranian supremacy. The people Lenin called useful idiots. And what a price this region has paid for Soleimani's bloodlust and vanity. In Iraq, hundreds of coalition troops killed in thousands of attacks by Soleimani-trained militia in the quagmire that followed the removal of Saddam Hussein, and more recently, when Iraqis took to the streets in protest against the corruption and ineptitude of their Iranian public government, Soleimani, as Arab News reported, flew to Baghdad, taking personal charge of the brutal crackdown in which at least 450 unarmed Iraqi civilians were killed. He goes on and on and on and on about what a thug this guy was. An Iranian expert said this.
I actually don't buy the idea that all Iranians are united now after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. I think Qasem Soleimani was a polarizing figure. There's some folks in Iran who passionately support him, others who don't support him. But destroying Iranian cultural sites would truly unite all Iranians against Trump and the United States.
Now, there was an op-ed piece in the Washington Post, again, not the Washington Times, the Washington Post. Masheed Alaned, I'm sure I'm butchering her last name, and said, don't believe the U.S. media coverage of the Soleimani mourners. She says, not true. Without a doubt, he had support among hardliners and loyalists, but talked about the, quote, thousands of Iranians that took to the street to protest the regime crackdown. Many of the mothers of those killed 2009, 2017, 2019 are rejoicing about Soleimani's death. How do I know? Because they've sent me videos of themselves speaking to the camera, dancing, even sharing cakes and tweets. And about the public gathering, public gatherings are allowed only if they are pro-regime. Critics are jailed or shot. Even when I was living outside the country, have received a death threat on Iranian TV for my coverage of Soleimani's killing. So it is not hard to use all the tools and resources of the state to stage a funeral procession. And she also takes the media to task. Many of the, she said, American medias are very skeptical about state demonstrations in places like Russia, China, but demonstrations in places like Iran, the American media covers it, doesn't say anything.